All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session focused on HR metrics and KPIs that matter. My name is Dan Grady. I'm part of the platform intelligence team here at ServiceNow, and what that means is that I focus on anything that has to do with data and analytics on the platform. So today we'll be focusing the majority of the time on performance analytics, but our team is also responsible for things like agent intelligence, which is the brand name that we've given to our in-platform machine learning, and our in-platform chatbot, which is our virtual agent. With me here today is Leonard Picagna. Leonard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, folks. So Leonard Picagna, I also work on the same team as Dan Grady on the platform intelligence team. And this is going to be a great session on HR analytics with performance analytics. So take it away, Dan.
Sure. Now, you're going to have questions as we go through this, and we're going to do our best to answer all of your questions at the end. But more important, the most important thing here to remember about your questions is please post your questions on the community page itself. So that way you not only get the benefit of our thoughts, because we'll be going back onto the community and answering those questions, but you're going to be you'll get answers and insights from your peers as well. And as we move through this session here today, you'll recognize that this is not a one-size-fits-all type of discussion. You're going to want to collaborate with your peers in this area to understand the types of things that they're measuring in from an HR perspective and the things that they're looking to get insights out of. So please post your questions on the community. You're going to get a lot more benefit that way than just a singular answer to your question if we ask it. So what are we going to do over the next hour? Well, first, we're going to start talking a little bit about some of the challenges and questions that many HR organizations face when it comes to analytics. And then we'll transition to a few minutes of a discussion around some of the benefits that you're going to get from an in-platform analytics solution, like the one we have with ServiceNow we call performance analytics. And then lastly, Leonard is going to be walking you through a live demonstration of how some of these analytics come to life on the screen in interactive dashboards. So you get a sense and a feel for how you would be interacting with the data on your own when it's live in your environment. Now let's focus in on those challenges, or should I say questions. And the first question we often get is, what should we be measuring? And determining this is critical to achieving success with any transformation, not just HR. And as you can see by the results of a recent study that I've got up there on the slide and been documented in the CIO factor, 90% of failed HR initiatives did not identify the right measures for success. And then even if they did identify them, they failed to manage their program against those metrics. Now, answering this question about what you should be measuring is not as simple as us just giving you a list of KPIs. Don't worry, we've got one and we will give it to you, but it's not that simple. Answering this question is more about you communicating with your own organization, what you're trying to achieve from a business outcome perspective, identifying the initiatives and the actions you'll be embarking on in pursuit of those outcomes, and then aligning metrics to those pursuits. And as we go through this session today, we'll share a ton of different examples to help you guys get your juices flowing in terms of the types of outcomes that organizations are interested in and the metrics that they're aligning to those outcomes. Now, question number 2 that we get: how do we report or analyze the data that we're capturing? So let's say you've identified the metrics and KPIs that are important to your organization. You've passed that hurdle. Now what? Now, traditionally, HR may not have had access to the same volumes or quality of data as other areas of the business. You may not have had the same infrastructure for managing that data, tools for mining that data, and you may not have had access to resources with data savvy resources with the skills needed to start mining and analyzing that data. For many organizations, all of those things are now changing. For others of you, it may not be. Regardless of where you sit there, in either one of those scenarios, one of the things that's making data and analytics more accessible and helping organizations get off the ground is that more and more platforms are offering embedded analytics solutions. And as we move forward in this session, you'll start to see why embedded analytics solutions are not just for jump-starting you on your analytics program, but they're going to become critical to the long-term success of your HR transformation as a whole. And then the last challenge or question that we get is, when do we start? When do we start thinking about analytics? I mean, clearly it can't be right away, right? I mean, we don't have any data to drive these metrics. And if that's what your thought was, you'd be 100% wrong. Right? This is a misstep that many organizations take. They treat analytics as an afterthought. Right? KPIs, metrics, and your overall analytics strategy should be thought up front and implemented in parallel with everything else that you're doing. What you want to measure and the things, the KPIs and metrics that you decide, they're going to impact the data that you need to collect as part of the processes that you're implementing. You don't want to get to the end of a transformational project and then have people start asking about the improvements, right? The transformation that's taken place, and have no way to communicate to them the value and the benefits of all the stuff that you've just done, all the things that you've just implemented. If you don't have the data and the analytics initially, or to tell that story, it's going to be looked at as a failed initiative or a failed project. And you're not going to have visibility into where the next step you can take from an improvement perspective would be. So when people ask this question, I usually answer, well, how soon is too soon to know about an opportunity to improve, right? You're going to want to know right away, the first, immediately, where your next opportunity to improve to be. So when do you start? You should be starting to think about analytics on day 1, not day 30. And the other little point that I'll make here is this, and you've all probably been involved in projects where you've budgeted for an implementation. And if you leave analytics to the end, what happens with many projects is you run out of funds. And now we've got something there, but we don't have any funds left to do any sort of data or analytics implementation or metric management implementation. So those are the 3 core challenges. As we go through this kind of presentation, you're going to see how an in-platform analytics solution like performance analytics can help address these 3 questions very easily. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of an in-platform analytics solution. It all starts with data. Everything is going to start with data. And as you start leveraging the ServiceNow platform, you're going to be, and your employees start leveraging the ServiceNow platform, a tremendous amount of data is going to be generated. And that's trusted data that we should be able to use to improve our decision-making process and ultimately improve our overall business performance. But there's a misstep that many organizations make, and traditional approaches to analytics have kind of garnered this, and they've actually kind of proved this out. And I like to use this quote to kind of crystallize that misstep. Certainly we want good results, but management by results is not the way to get those good results. We need to work on the causes of those results. Very often when people think of analytics, their mind immediately goes to a dashboard, and we need to provide executive level dashboards, of course. Here's the dirty little secret of analytics. The numbers on those executive level dashboards, they don't move just because we have executive level dashboards. Those numbers only start to move when we start influencing and changing the behaviors of all of the stakeholders involved in contributing to those numbers. Right? So in order to maximize the value that we're going to get out of all this rich data that's being generated on the platform, we have to extend its reach out to everyone inside of the organization, all of the stakeholders that are going to be involved. Traditional approaches to business analytics have failed in this way. Their adoption rates have always hovered in the 20 to 30% range because they can't get to the front lines. They can't get to everyone, because the further you move out in an organization, the less likely you are to get somebody to leave the system that they're doing work in to go to someplace else to look at numbers. It's why you're starting to see more and more solutions, operational solutions, come with embedded analytics, because they want to start taking or maximizing the value of all this rich data to drive the behaviors of everyone, including the frontline workers, because those are the things that actually impact the bottom line, the changes in behaviors of those folks out there in the front lines and the people that are managing them. Now, when you start thinking about embedded analytics solution, there's 3 core benefits that you should get from any in-platform or embedded analytics solution. First and foremost is real-time access to information. Because the data is staying in the platform, as you start seeing trends, patterns, anomalies in the data, you will always have the ability, or should always have the ability, to drill down in real time and get to that detailed data. And be able to drill down and getting to the detailed data in real time makes the data much more actionable. And that's really where you want. If you want to start driving behaviors and making the most of the data that you have access to, you need to make it as actionable as possible in as real time as possible. And by staying with an in-platform solution, you add 0 latency to the data. You will always have the ability to access it in real time. Native. What this is all about, this is all about leveraging the wisdom of the crowds, leveraging our knowledge of what others like you in your space want to measure, and the types of analytics that you're interested in, and us understanding how the underlying platform works. And then being able to leverage all of that understanding to provide you with out-of-the-box pre-configured analytics content. So as of the Madrid release, we now offer 650 plus out-of-the-box pre-configured indicators across all of the applications on the platform, as well as 150 plus different dashboards. Now, when it comes to HR specifically, we provide you with 50 plus out-of-the-box indicators for HR. And here's just a subset of those 50 key performance indicators or metrics that we offer you out of the box on the platform. And the complete list we can make available to you as well. So we give you these 50 out-of-the-box indicators, as well as a number of different dashboards. So for example, we give you a dashboard focused on an HR manager to provide insights on how HR teams are meeting certain expectations. We provide you an out-of-the-box agent-level dashboard to get information out all the way to the front lines to help those agents manage their caseloads and stay on top of their backlog, providing them a streamlined experience inside of the platform to help drive their behaviors. We provide an out-of-the-box HR onboarding executive dashboard to give executives insight into how smoothly we're onboarding new employees. And then new in Madrid, we've packaged up a couple of dashboards focused on one, content analytics, so you can start getting some metrics and visibility into the effectiveness of how your employee service portal is working. And then we've also packaged up a dashboard focused on campaign analytics, so you get some visibility into the effectiveness of the campaigns that you're running. Right? Both of these dashboards, again, new in Madrid, packaged content, turn on performance analytics for HR, and you start getting visibility into these different dashboards. So all of this content is designed to just jumpstart you on your analytics journey on the platform. And then as you start realizing that you have business outcomes that may be a little different than this, you also have the ability to start authoring your own KPIs and start blending them together with the stuff that we provide you out of the box. It's a huge value add that you get by going with an in-platform solution, is to leverage these pre-configured key performance indicators that we've given you, and it also gives you guidance in terms of what the types of things that you should be measuring. Now, the last aspect or benefit that you're going to get from an in-platform solution is security. Because you're staying on the platform, you're going to be able to leverage all of the security infrastructure that you've put in place, so people can only see the data that they're supposed to see. If for some crazy reason you're choosing to move the data off the platform, you would have to rebuild some layer of security around that data to maintain its integrity and make sure that people can only see data that's specific to them. We want to make sure that we leverage all the work that you're doing from a security perspective, and we certainly do by staying with an in-platform analytics solution. Now, in addition to those three aspects, the in-platform analytics or performance analytics brings additional value to the data by adding additional context to it. Context in three very specific ways: time, influence, and people. And I'm just going to walk you through how each of those, or what we mean by each of those aspects of context. First and foremost is time. And if somebody came to me and said, Dan, could you help differentiate the reporting that we get on the platform and performance analytics for me, and you get one slide to do it, this would be the one slide that I would use to differentiate the two. The operational reporting on the platform is fantastic at helping us ask and answer this one very specific question: where are we today? Where are we right now? Right? And that's useful for so many situations to have access to that level of information about where we are right now. But if I came to any one of you and I asked or said, hey, do you know that you have 119 open HR cases right now? And then asked, is that good or is that bad? You wouldn't have the data necessary to effectively answer that question. In order to effectively answer that question, you need not only where we are today, but you also need visibility into where you were before. Performance analytics brings the infrastructure and the engine to allow us to start snapshotting the data over time. So we can not only answer where we are today, we can answer where we were before. And now that we have both of these data points, we can answer the more important question, which is whether we are improving or not. Right? You're investing in the ServiceNow platform to transform, to get better, to make a difference. You want to have the data necessary to answer the question about whether you're getting better or not. In addition to being able to answer that important question, performance analytics also brings the infrastructure necessary for you to start setting targets or goals related to the metrics that you've set forth for yourself. So now you can start communicating within the organization not only where we are right now, but where we want to be to start driving some behaviors. We also give you with performance analytics a forecasting engine, so you can start forecasting out when you will potentially reach those goals or targets that you've set for yourself. And in addition to that, we also give you visibility into different slices of the data that we call breakdowns, so you get an understanding of what levers you could be pulling inside of the organization to help you reach those goals more quickly or more efficiently. So all of those other bubbles above and beyond where we are today, performance analytics brings the infrastructure and the engine to allow you to start answering those questions. The best analogy I've ever heard to describe the difference between the two, the reporting on the platform and performance analytics, is this. One of my colleagues said, "Hey, Dan, the reporting is kind of like a scoreboard at a game. It tells me the home team is up 28-27, tells me how much time is left in the game, how many timeouts each team has. But what it doesn't tell me is this. It doesn't tell me that the home team was up 28-0 and the visitors just scored 27 straight points. It doesn't tell me that the home team's best player just got hurt 2 or 3 minutes ago. It gives me no visibility into the momentum inside of the game. And you would hope, unless you're, let's say, the Atlanta Falcons, you're going to coach or manage that game differently based on the momentum. The same is true with our businesses. You will manage your business differently and more effectively once you get visibility into the momentum inside of the organization, and performance analytics brings that visibility. That's the concept or context of time. Now, the next aspect of context that we'll focus on is the context of influence. And what this is all about is helping you get away from measuring and tracking things in isolation. A mistake that many organizations make is they look at individual metrics and they look at them in isolation. And anything that you're tracking or measuring in isolation, you're always going to be reacting to. What we are allowing you to do, or what we allow you to do with performance analytics, and you'll see this inside of the demonstration, is start layering and building relationships between the key performance indicators that you're tracking. And now that you start, once you start visualizing those relationships between the metrics, it allows you to see things before they happen. It allows you to become more proactive. Very often what you'll hear is you'll hear people talk about leading and lagging indicators, right? This concept of, hey, there's things that we're measuring that are outcome based that we can't really change when we look, once we start seeing it, once it's happened. But there's also, and those are called lagging indicators. And then there's this concept of leading indicators. They're more action oriented, right? They're things that I can measure around the actions that I'm taking that influence those lagging indicators. The common example that you'll hear about is the weight on the scale. Like when you step on the scale, that weight, that's a lagging indicator. At that point, there's nothing I can do about it. But there's things that I can measure and track before I step on that scale, like my caloric intake and the number of steps. Those things would be leading indicators. And if I improve on those, guess what? My weight on that scale should be different the next time I step on it. Right? So there's different types of indicators. Some people call them leading and lagging. I like to call them influencing and impacted metrics. And there's any metric that we talk about can be leading or lagging. It just depends on where we sit in the organization and the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So for example, at the executive level, maybe I'm trying to improve my ESAT scores by 5 points in the next 90 days. That would be a lagging indicator in this scenario. That's the output that I'm going for. Something that I can improve upon that should drive that ESAT score is I can lower my case closure times by 10%. So if I start seeing an improvement in my case closure times, you would think that that would impact my ESAT scores. So in this case, my closure times are a leading indicator for my ESAT scores. And then, how am I going to lower those case closure times? What is something that I can track or improve upon that will actually impact that or influence those closure times? Well, I should start measuring things like my cases not worked on in 3 days, because if I can reduce that number, that should have an impact or an influence on my closure times. My closure times are then going to have an influence on my ESAT scores. So there's this chain of metrics that we can start tracking or capturing or focusing on from an organizational perspective that influence one another. And then when you start trying to build out your dashboards, you want to start layering these metrics on top of each other to tell that more complete story with the data. And the last aspect of context that we'll focus on is this context of people. Right? You've got this single system of engagement, action, record, whatever you want to call all the data that's flowing through the platform right now. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that data to align everyone in the organization to the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve. But the trick is this: I can't give everyone the same lens into that information. I can't take an executive level dashboard and roll it out to the agent on the front lines and expect that it's going to change their behavior in any way, shape, or form. And that's really what I'm driving for when it comes to analytics, is using the analytics to drive or change behaviors. Because as we mentioned earlier, it's those behavioral changes that actually influence and drive the numbers on that executive level dashboard. And so what we're going to focus on, and what Leonard's going to focus on in the demonstration, he's going to focus on showing you how different stakeholders potentially would leverage performance analytics inside of the platform, or the in-platform analytics, to help them do their job in a more effective fashion, help give them the visibility that they need to change their behaviors or to make organizational decisions. Just to give you a sense of a couple of the stakeholders that we typically see and the types of outcomes and metrics that they're interested in from an HR perspective. One would be the head of HR shared services. That's a common executive level persona that we see very often. And if we think about the business outcomes that they're focused on, many times it's things like increased HR efficiency, reliability, and consistency. They want to free up HR to focus on higher value work, and they want to improve employee satisfaction. So in those areas, or things that are kind of from a metrics perspective that are tied to those business outcomes, we're typically looking at things like the cost of case management, some case deflection metrics, our HR case volume and the velocity in which we're responding to those cases, open times and resolution times, escalations and transfer rates. Transfer rates are a good one because that's a leading indicator for, let's say, our closure times. So blending those two things together is something you often see very often. Employee satisfaction, backlog, loads for agents, SLA attainment. These are all common key performance indicators or metrics that you see aligned to these three outcomes that the head of HR shared services is typically focused on. What the analytics will help you, or what types of questions do metrics like this help you answer, are things like, what type of adoption are we seeing of our more consumer or employee-friendly and cost-effective channels? What type of impact is that shift across channels having on overall employee satisfaction? Which teams are consistently escalating incoming cases in which areas? That's a good visualization, or a good way to find training opportunities if we can start monitoring that. And where are you consistently seeing high volume of cases, and what is the velocity and handling those? Those types of insights help you adjust staffing appropriately, or where you should start applying maybe some more advanced analytics like machine learning, or or rolling out a virtual agent potentially to decrease some of those volumes. And then you can start asking and answering questions around the knowledge base having the impact that we anticipated. As knowledge adoption, or as our service center is being more adopted, are we seeing a decrease in incoming cases and an improvement in our resolution times or closure times and satisfaction scores? Another popular executive persona that we very often are asked to focus on from an analytics and metrics perspective is Chief Experience Officer. And in those cases, we're focused on outcomes like talent acquisition, reduced attrition, and increased profitability. And I'm not going to go through the entire list here, but on the right-hand side, here are some of the metrics that kind of feed into those experience type examples. So ESAT scores, of course, but that's not the only way to measure employee satisfaction. You have things like knowledge article ratings and views, and feedback on KP articles, channel adoption, again, click-through rates. There's a lot of things that actually go into it, and actually Leonard's going to show you an example in the demonstration of how we can use analytics to kind of bucket all of these things together, all of these influencing factors, to get a better sense of overall employee experience from a measurement or KPI perspective. So types of questions that we typically answer at this level: how do I measure employee experience? This is a key one that everybody's focused on, and you're going to see what we call an indexed-based score for measuring this in a few minutes. Are we improving the onboarding experience and reducing the time to productivity for employees? Are we reducing the cost of attrition of overtime? And if not, what are the biggest contributing factors for people leaving the organization? We are able to capture this level of data on the platform, apply metrics to these things, and give you the visibility to answer these types of questions with what we have from a performance analytics perspective for HR on the platform. All right, that was a lot. Shared a ton of information, and now I'm going to pass it over to my friend Leonard, and he's going to walk you through some of that how some of that thing is manifested in the platform in a live demonstration. So Leonard, I'm going to stop sharing and you're going to take over.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Sure.
All right. So Dan mentioned 3 important contexts that we'll demonstrate in a few minutes here: people, influence, and time. And so the scenario that we wanted to share with you today was where we've got a hero. Our hero in this case is HR, on a fighting the talent war, on a full-out fight for talent, for HR talent. And our hero here is our Chief Experience Officer. And so we'll talk about how we can use performance analytics from these different perspectives, from the different roles, as Dan mentioned, starting at the Chief Experience Officer level. So an executive setting out business outcomes to focus the work and energy of the organization, and how do we actually use performance analytics all the way out to down to the frontline caseworker. So we'll show you how to do that. Dan also talked about influence, and this is so important, right? So as he shared, we're using performance analytics to figure out and get proactive and not be reactive. So before something becomes a problem, we need to understand what's going to, we need to get ahead of that problem. And so if our goal here in our scenario, in our little story, is to improve employee satisfaction by 10% in 90 days, that's our business objective. That's something that the Chief Experience Officer is going to set. Now, how do we know whether or not we're going to hit that? And as Dan mentioned, this business objective is a lagging indicator. It's a count. It's a percentage calculation. We can't change it. We know what our employee stat is today, and there's nothing we can do. But what we can do is go through all these different roles, and they have responsibilities that can actually influence this business outcome. So these are all leading indicators. So if we look at the HR manager, they are able to reduce the number of open cases with breached SLAs by 10%. They are able to reduce the number of cases with no updates, and so forth. All of these these are all leading indicators which influence this lagging indicator. And this is the relationship that Dan mentioned of layering together these different key performance indicators so we can be proactive. And down all the way, reaching down to the HR caseworker, from an influence perspective, the HR caseworker can influence that business objective by eliminating unassigned cases, or reducing reassignments, or reducing the amount of closed cases equal to 0. So each of these different roles will show how they can proactively get ahead of any kind of problem and affect the business outcome. And finally, Dan mentioned time. And so we'll go through looking at the trends, looking at where we were in the past to where we're going, and make course corrections. And with this combination of people, influence, and time, this is how we have everyone rowing in the right direction, right? We're all driving toward this improving employee satisfaction by 10%. All right. So let's take a look at what that looks like in the technology. So as I mentioned, the scenario is around our hero, our fearless leader, the Chief Experience Officer, to fight the talent wars. Right, HR has engaged into into employing digital transformation across different core HR processes, and really the drive is to bring a consumer type of experience into the workplace to get work done faster and more effectively, and make it much more enjoyable, and to match that experience that employees have with their personal lives, right? When they go and they order something, or they go and they shop online. So we're trying to the digital transformation efforts are trying to match that, because we know if we can bring that ease of use, we can drive retention rates, and we can drive employee satisfaction, and that is seen through employee satisfaction. So the 3 key performance indicators or business outcomes that the Chief Experience Officer is using to measure her effectiveness is the Employee Experience Index, the Employee Net Promoter Score, and the Employee Retention Rate. And so this number 85, there's a compact amount of information just in this number, in this little visual here. We're on week 34 for this time frame. We've got 85, which is green. The green means something, right? And we've got a target 5 to 80. So we're exceeding our target, and we've got a positive trending change. So a lot of information just on that, in that one visual. And it's called an index because, as Dan mentioned, we've layered on different relationships that influence that number. So this is 85 would be a lagging indicator. The employee experience index is a lagging indicator, and the leading indicators are these other key performance indicators. So percent of employees with portal engagement, percent of employees active in the community, knowledge article ratings. So these are all things that determine the effectiveness of some new ways of self-service or digitizing, the ability to find out answers so I can get my work done, or employees can get their work done, employee satisfaction, average age of open cases, and average closure time of HR cases. Notice that's red, and we can actually see a trend for each of these individual key performance indicators, these leading indicators that influence this 85, this lagging indicator up here. And we can see certain trends, whether or not they're trending individually in the right direction. We can see that there's two that are trending negatively, and we'll get back to that. I did want to go through some other out-of-the-box key performance metric indicators that are on here. So we've got moments that matter. So different moments are part of the journey of an employee life cycle, right? So things like leave of absence, maybe because of a pregnancy, a new addition to the family, relocation. So we're monitoring these different moments as well as the services we offer. We're also looking at the new digital adoption. So we're looking at, for example, portal and community adoption. Are we able to drive, are people using the portal and community, or are they still calling in? How are they accessing HR? And that brings us to this next interesting visual that this this experience officer is looking at, is the channels. So when the cases are getting opened, are they getting opened through phone, email, chat, or some of the new digital technologies? We can see some HR executives are trying to drive and do away with the phone and drive everyone either to a chatbot, an HR chatbot, or to the employee self-service portal. And phone would be sort of last resort. So they're trying to organize everything and design everything so that it's purely self-service. Okay, and then we can also see things such as employee retention rates, offboarding, and so forth in terms of employee movement. Now, so again, my eyes are drawn to the average closure time of HR cases. So this is one key performance indicator that impacts this 85, this employee experience index. So this is showing already in red, I've got a problem, and it's trending upwards. So it's not a problem yet, but because we're using the concept of lagging and leading indicators, we can get ahead of this problem. And as an executive, I can drill into this and say, okay, I've got the average closure time of HR cases. Let me see what's behind this. And I'm brought into a new Madrid capability called Analytics Hub. And this is sort of the one-stop shop where you can take this particular key performance indicator and analyze it from multiple different ways. So let's take a look at what we've got here right now. We've got this concept of time that Dan mentioned. So I can look and analyze the data and change these bars so I can focus on a specific time period. I have a number of descriptive statistics right away. So I can see, I'm currently at 209 hours for average closure time. Is that, what is that in terms of my average? Well, it's way above my average of 117 hours. So quickly, I've got descriptive statistics that tell me that I'm way over what historically, right, where I've been in the past in terms of resolving close HR issues. I can also quickly access a number of inbuilt time series analysis, such as moving averages over different 30-day, 7-day, weekly averages, quarterly averages. So I've got the ability to slice and reconfigure this based on time. I can look and break it down and look at different angles of this particular indicator. So here, if I take a look at assignment group of the teams responsible for answering these types of the closing these cases, I can see that HR benefits in tier 1. So benefits sort of catches my eye because I know we've been doing a lot of transformation on benefits, and we're pretty high in terms of we've changed, and we're very high in terms of the amount of hours needed to close our cases. If I can focus my attention on just HR benefits, and I can see the trend, and I can see, all right, well, this is currently in this time slice what the behavior has been, but is this a trend that's I should be worried about? Is this a trend that I need to be concerned about? Well, by just clicking this trend button, I've got a host of predictive capabilities just at my fingertips. It's applied a regression. I can add confidence bands, and I can see, well, the trend is going up, and so it is something that I want to take a look at. Well, let me look at in the future. Can I forecast? Is that trend going to continue? And forecasting it out and expanding my timeline, my time horizon, I can see that through this volatility, it is still climbing forward. And there's a number of other things. I won't touch on them all, but we can set the targets and the thresholds that Dan mentioned earlier when we were talking about the time aspect. And this is really important, right? This is telling us where we're going to go. And now we can focus on what we need to do to reverse this trend. All right, so the Chief Experience Officer is about to give a call to the shared services, head of HR shared services. But the head of shared services is already aware of this problem. When I pull up his dashboard, I'm already looking at it and I'm saying, all right, well, I'm looking at my metrics are cost of service, employee sat, and backlog. I can see different things such as weekly case transfer rates, case management trends, and volume. But what keeps me aligned with the Chief Experience Officer is I've got cost of service breakdowns, case closure time breakdowns, and benefits are popping up already. So even before the Chief Experience Officer gives me a ring, before she calls me to say, hey, we've got a problem, I already know we've got a problem. So because we've pulled in we're showing the analytics relevant to this particular role's influence, and we're linking them all together with the Chief Experience Officer's goal, key performance indicators. We're already seeing, for example, some of the things that are influencing and that lagging indicator, that employee experience indicator, and we can see, well, benefits is definitely a problem. All right, and so then same thing, I can move on to the actual case manager and see this person's view. And in her case, she is concerned with taking a look at backlog and the percent of closed cases. What she can influence is things such as, in her purview, she can focus on any of the different services. In this case, I had benefits focused on, so she can take a look at benefits and can already see that I've got, I've got a, case volume seems to be increasing quite a bit. And then I can take a look at agent workload distribution, and I can see, well, I'm not evenly distributed. I've got quite a heavy weight in terms of this particular caseworker. And so I could actually click into this and reconfigure and reassign case workload. But from an HR case manager point of view, right? So the Chief Experience Officer saw that employee experience is okay right now. It's still green, but benefits seem to be trending in the wrong direction. HR, the head of HR shared services, he saw that and confirmed that there are increased costs, there's increased volume for the benefits, and then the HR manager, when looking at the benefits service, is seeing that he's got high volume that's increasing, and can see an opportunity to redistribute workload. The HR manager can also take a look at all of the cases in their different states. So he can look at the cases over time again and take a look at them in different statistics in terms of like the ready state, those that are waiting approval, and can actually click into the record and change that. All right, so we've got the management teams aligned. What about the case worker? The furthest person from the top, right? And typically, an individual contributor like myself or like Dan, the Chief Experience Officer is trying to drive employee experience. That's great. But Dan and I are working down here trying to knock out these cases. So we're not actually looking at that vision. Well, this is how we keep everyone aligned and rowing in the same direction. So here I am, I'm working in the case list that I do my day-to-day job in. And I can see on here that there have been strategically placed a set of metrics that keep me connected. Now, they don't say explicitly employee satisfaction, but these are critical metrics that I can influence at my individual contributor level as a caseworker, that I can influence, that will help drive the higher executive goal set for the organization, set for HR. So here I can see that open critical HR cases are 19. HR case backlog is 110. I can see my team's performance trend, and it's actually increasing. So what I see here is I can take a look at my backlog, and I can see, well, there might be a little bit of a dip on the backlog, but if I take a look at the average age of open cases and overlay that on top, I can see that the average age of open cases is increasing. So that might mean myself or my team, we may be cherry picking the easy ones and leaving a number of critical cases open, which take much more time. So I need to get on that. And then I can also see the average closure times. And I do see, that the average closure times are dipping. That might be because we're focused on the easy things first. So, but these analytics help me quickly align with the chief experience officer's business objectives without me actually, in my context of work. Another area that helps, and I don't know about the folks on the phone, but I know Dan and myself, we're pretty competitive. So if Dan was on this team and I was on this other team, and I see that Dan's higher than me, even though I respect Dan and think the world of him, it's going to grind me that his team is, he's knocking out more cases than I am in terms of close rates. And so by putting the team efficiency ranking, we help positively motivate different teams, so they all see that, hey, there are people that are working hard. We all need to, work hard as a team to achieve the overall objective of the HR organization. Okay, now finally, we start off with the experience officer noting that there was an issue around the benefit services. So I've got quite a bit of cases in my queue. And so where do I know where to start? Where typically I would just sort by priority. But in this case, if I scroll over, you can see there's a score. And this is something that's unique in the platform. It's called Spotlight. And so what this allows us to do is take multiple different factors. In this case, we prioritized any service that is being monitored by the chief experience officer. And so that's one factor influencing this score. We also have other things such as priority or other factors such as SLA breach that impact and give a higher weight to this score, the scoring formula. So there's a scoring formula behind this that you can take a look at in the documentation under Spotlight. But this score is actually bubbling to the top a bunch of benefits issues. See, so our first three right away are benefits are related to that benefit service that the head of that the chief experience officer saw. So all the way from the top, that chief experience officer is focused on employee experience, found that benefits was an issue. We were able to confirm that from different levels of personas. So each level was able to influence it in their own different way, positively, all the way down to the
Well, I think we lost a little audio there. You were dropping off all the way down to the Leonard?
for this out.
Yeah, you dropped off, and I think you're back on now.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. How much did I drop off on?
About maybe 8 or 10 seconds.
Okay, great.
Is that all right, Dan?
Yeah, you're good. I mean, I think you were just kind of summing up how we were aligning. We use performance analytics to align everyone in the organization.
That's correct, Dan. Thank you. All right. So before I hand it back over to Dan, we wanted to share. Dan and I wanted to share some best practices, and so, when we I like this. This quote is interesting, and Dan made a reference to this earlier. Just having lots of KPIs doesn't make you a data-driven organization. Often I've walked in and I've been asked to help with adoption of performance analytics. And even in my entire analytics career of over 20 years, this is a very common question. someone will show me a dashboard with a lot of numbers on it, and they'll say, I don't understand why it's not getting adopted. You know, the management team or the executives aren't using it. And you look at it, and there isn't a story, the numbers don't have a relationship toward a business outcome. And so, you know, just because you have a lot of KPIs, you know, you need those three contexts of influence to drive that business outcome, that the three of people, time, and influence. So some of the best practices are to start with organizational objectives, define your stakeholders, the influencers, right, the people, define that organizational objective, the business outcome, identify what information they need to ensure they are contributing to the org objective, and then the KPIs and the dashboards then fall after that. But just some high level steps, and Dan will talk about something new that we just released to help you achieve this. Oh, after I cover this. So in terms of adoption, you know, often we hear, let's build an executive dashboard, right? And we've got this, in terms of adoption, what works best is, yes, you've got to find out what the executive needs to set the direction of the organization. But we have this concept with this left arrow going from right to left of design from the executive dashboard, but you really need to build from left to right. So you need to start with your data foundation. It's so important that you go through and you clean up any kind of data. You have this culture of cleanup because it drives the confidence in the data. As Dan mentioned, one of the advantages of performance analytics is you're keeping the data in platform. I don't know, I can number many cases where I've walked in, talked to executives, and they don't know what the HR employee attrition rate truly is because people are pulling the data off platform and putting it into different tools and changing the data, or it's stale. Okay, so trusting the data is key. Then we build that baseline, right?
And you build that baseline. Oh, we got you dropping audio again.
So I'll pick up for Leonard. The idea here, so is one, as Leonard mentioned, you're going to be designing from right to left. So you've got your high level dashboard. You understand the metrics that are tied to the business outcomes that the executive team is looking for, and then you're going to start.
So we have this baseline, the complementary training.
Okay, Leonard's back.
Yep.
But if you just go back one slide, Leonard, because you dropped off there, just to complete a thought. So you're going to be, you design the metrics from right to left, from where you want to be, the ideal state, and then kind of identify the stakeholders that are contributing to that ideal state and the metrics that matter to them. But when you start building out the metrics and the KPIs that are aligned to those different dashboards for the different stakeholders, you want to start from left to right. You really need to start in understanding the data foundation that you have in place. And you get a huge leg up, as Leonard mentioned, because you're using an in-platform solution. You don't get any of those data quality issues that come with transferring or moving data around. The more you can stay within a system of record or system of engagement like ServiceNow, the less data integrity issues you run into. We also give you some dashboards that help give you some visibility into the quality of the data that you have, because the last thing that you want, one of the quickest ways to kill the adoption of any analytics program or any dashboards that you roll out is that people lose trust in the data that's driving them and the data that's behind them. So it's important to focus on that data foundation piece first. Then you set up your baseline of dashboards for the individual stakeholders. And then you kind of get into a much more responsive business state where you're able to build out cross-service and cross-process style dashboards to help you get a better picture of all the different influencing factors inside of the organization and where your opportunities to improve lie across the different processes or services that you're offering. Now, this is something that we call the performance analytics adoption or customer adoption journey when it comes to performance analytics. And if Leonard, if you want to just advance to the next slide, that concept that we just briefly walked through there, as well as other important foundational concepts around performance analytics, are now being offered in a training class that is complimentary, no cost. We put a little yellow box around it where it says cost. There's nothing there. There's a dollar sign, but there is no cost to this. This is a new complimentary training that we're offering online. So it's called Performance Analytics Essentials. We highly recommend that you run on out, you Google Performance Analytics Essentials. It's on the training and education site, and take this class as you start ramping up or you start thinking about implementing performance analytics inside of your organization. This is a good foundational piece that'll cover a number of the different topics that we covered here today, probably in a little bit more depth than what we covered here today as well. And then that kind of moves you on to the next path, which is the Performance Analytics Fundamentals training. That's a complimentary training that we recommend that you offer. What we'll do is, I hope that you've all been posting questions. Your questions in the community site there underneath this, and we'll get those questions answered for you. But we'll also post the link to this training there as well. And then I think, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll be able to post the slides there as well. Is that where we'll be putting them?
Yep, we'll put them as an attachment on the discussion.
Perfect. We'll put the slides as an attachment on the discussion. So for those of you that have asked about the slides, they'll be on the discussion. This complimentary training or link to it will be on the discussion as well. And then, we'll have hopefully a nice collaborative dialogue with myself, Leonard, and then you and your peers around other areas of interest when it comes to HR metrics and KPIs that matter for your organizations. With that, I just want to thank you all for your time here today, and look forward to seeing some of you at Knowledge, and definitely interacting with you guys online in the community moving forward.
Yep. Thanks, folks, for listening in.
I'm looking for some questions, but I'm not seeing any yet at this time. Just at the end, somebody asked that they get that link to Performance Analytics Essentials. So we will make sure that we post that on the link of the community that you can also find in the top chat of the YouTube. And we'll be providing that shortly if no one else has any other questions. I'm not seeing much any come through. But again, you can always post your questions on the community. And both Leonard and Dan will be monitoring that link to then answer anything you've got. Anything else, gentlemen?
Nope, nothing on this end.
Okay, well then we thank you all for joining us again today, and we'll see you in our next session coming soon. Be sure to check out the community.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.